And let me grab this for you.
I got it. All right. I don't know who's going to be on camera this morning, but I like to move around, so if there's somebody on the camera, if not, then I'll be, for the people watching on video, they'll kind of miss me and I'll be off camera, but I'll keep talking. What an honor to be here with you guys today and to be able to share a message. You know, when Chris mentioned what I was going to be preaching on this morning, I looked at it and then I went, dang, two things that I'm really bad at. And I got to talk to you guys about it. So that's the good thing, because the way I like to speak, and I'm normally speaking to young people, is I like to just bring the reality down to each one of us, that no matter where we go in our faith, and no matter where you are, whether you're walking in the faith or you're still checking it out or you're just still rejecting it, God just meets you exactly where you're at. You know, church isn't about people that have got all figured out and we all just get together and we have a little kumbaya moment around a campfire. This is a real battle situation where we're all dealing with stuff. And we come to a place like this because we're looking for some hope, some direction. We're looking for fellowship. We're tired of being alone and feeling like when we fight our battles that we got nobody that we can lean on. Well, if you feel that way, you're in the right place. If you're still searching, you're in the right place. Good for you for being here. You're doing the right thing. So no matter where you're at, that's why we're here. We're not here to say some religious things, sing some songs, and then check off a box and feel good about ourselves. We're here because, man, life is tough. And the battles that you guys face, the battles that I face, they're real. And gosh, sometimes we really don't know what to do. And so today's scripture comes at us, and it's a continuation of what Chris and Trevor spoke in the last couple of weeks. I did pipe in and see those to make sure that I didn't repeat too much of what they're talking about, but throw the verses up there. This is what we're going to be talking about today, Matthew 5, verses 7 and 8, and it says, I can't even see that. Okay, here it is. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. And blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. I don't know, I'm more of the suck it up and stop whining kind of a guy. And purity, oh man, lifelong battle. Just not even in my own mind and my heart and my thoughts, but purity in the way that talks about where my life is lined up with God's. So let's just agree on something today. Let's both, you and me, let's just be honest and say we don't have it figured out. You know, I was youth pastor to two of your pastors' wives, and I married another one of your pastors' couples, so I'm pretty well connected here, and I know them well enough to know that they don't have it figured out either. And yeah, if you have any questions, just ask Amy. She'll fill you in. So that's the cool thing, right? I mean, we stand up here and we talk to you guys, but today, the guy that's talking to you does not have it figured out. To be honest with you, I really spent some time just being honest with today's passage, just saying, am I a merciful person? What aspects of my life, as I start to get ready to talk to you, are not so pure, not so right-focused and in line with what God would want? And there's a lot still there. I've walked with the Lord now. I've been a Christian for 50 years. I don't have it figured out. As a matter of fact, I think I understand what Paul meant when he said he's the chief of all sinners. The longer you walk with the Lord, the more you realize how terribly you missed the mark. I say all of this to let you know that the guy that's speaking to you wants you to feel like you're in a living room. We're just sitting down and we're chatting together about how can we become more merciful and how can we work purity more into our lives. Because the other side of that is something we all desperately need. My friends, you need mercy this morning. And the other thing you desperately need is you need to see God. We just cannot afford to not get those things. And the interesting thing, the way the Lord works this out, and again, at the end of this Sermon on the Mount, I can't remember, Chris, if you mentioned this or not, but at the end of the Sermon on the Mount, there's this verse. I don't know if it's going to be up there for you. In chapter 7, when he's finishing this sermon that you guys have heard about, the introduction of that sermon that we got a couple weeks ago, little hillside up above the Sea of Galilee, when he was given this message, he was not the first person that they had heard preach, not the first pastor or rabbi that they had heard a message from, but when he spoke, when Jesus spoke, they were astounded. And it says in verse 28 and 29 of Matthew chapter 7, there it is, it says, when Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were amazed at his teaching, because he taught as one who had authority and not as the teachers of the law. And I've heard the last couple sermons, and you know what? Your pastors are speaking to you not in this religious jargon that's hard to understand. They're laying this message out so that we can all understand it, because they're probably smarter than I am, but I'm not smart enough to figure out a lot of stuff. And I love the way Jesus deals with this passage and with this sermon. And what he's doing, he's taken all the confusion of all the messages that these people had heard, and he's just making sense out of it. He's laying it out so that we can understand it. And that's why they were astounded. So what I want us to realize this morning, and we're just going to take a few minutes to deal in these two concepts of mercy and purity, is you're in good company if you, like me, feel like you haven't arrived. And maybe you might feel like not even close. I'm just not there at all. You're in good company. I think the goal today would be for you to spend some time just analyzing these two aspects of your life. Because like I said before, we need the other side of this verse. We need the mercy. We need that forgiveness. We need to be restored. We need to have God wipe our slate clean. And then we need to, in life, especially today, more than ever, with everything that's happening around us, bombarded with all kinds of messages, especially you young people. Gosh, we just need to be able to see God. We need to be able to sense him and see his direction and know that he's there. So here we go. Mercy begets mercy. Purity begets the opportunity to see God. Are we clear on that? If you want mercy, you need to be merciful. If you want to see God, you need to work on being pure. And that's the way the Lord oftentimes weaves these promises into our lives. We love the promises. We love when the Lord says, I'm going to do this for you. I'm going to give you this. But what we don't realize, or sometimes what we forget, is that promise comes with our part. And so I just came up with a few quick examples of that. One very popular verse that we love to quote is Jeremiah 29:11. It's probably up there. It says, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you, not to harm you. Plans to give you hope in the future. This passage happens right in the middle of where the prophet Jeremiah is telling the nation of Israel, you're basically doomed. All this life of sin that you've been living, all this rejection of God, all of this stuff that you've done as you have thrown God out under the bus and you have actually worshiped other gods and done horrible and terrible things, in the midst of all of that, he still says, I know the plans I have for you. As God's voice into that ugliness, he still says, I still have a plan for you. And that plan is one that's designed to give you hope and a future. And then in verse 13, it says this. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. You don't get to know the plans that the Lord has for you until you seek him. And that was what the nation of Israel was having a problem doing. They weren't seeing God anymore. They weren't experiencing God's goodness. They were not having hope, and their future was very bleak. But even in the midst of that, the Lord says, dude, if you just change, if you'll just seek me, I'm there to be found. That's great news. The other one that we may be familiar with, in Luke chapter 6, verse 37, it says, do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. So we like when we don't feel judged, cornered, guilty. We love when we get away with or get forgiven for something. And we love to be forgiven. What we don't sometimes remember is if you don't want to be judged, then don't be so judgmental. And if you don't want to be condemned, then maybe you need to stop condemning those of the people that are around you. And if you want to be forgiven, you must forgive. It gets even dicier over here in Matthew 6:15. It says, but if you don't forgive others their sins, your Father won't forgive your sins. Did you know that? There's going to be a sermon later on, because we're going to be going through the Sermon on the Mount through this whole thing, right? We're going to do the whole 3 chapters, and you're going to get into this a little bit deeper. But I don't know about you, but I absolutely and desperately need God's forgiveness. I mess up a lot. You know what I mean? And so if I want to be in the position of receiving His forgiveness, I need to be forgiving. So that's my part, and that's your part. This is not rocket science, my friends. This is really basic stuff, and it should be logical. You know, all of us have family. Sometimes those family relationships are really good and smooth, but oftentimes they're not. But I have found that no matter how difficult, no matter how dicey and ugly the situation is, boy, if you can get around to forgiving, boy, you can get a brother back. You can restore that relationship with your in-laws, or you can actually have a decent relationship with your wife. It seems simple. I know it's harder than that. But if you forgive, you too then can receive that forgiveness. It's not that God gets limited and He all of a sudden can't forgive, but He cannot forgive you if you don't first forgive. You don't put yourself in a place where you can receive His forgiveness until you also forgive. And it's the same thing with what we're talking about this morning. You really can't be in a position to receive His mercy, even though it's always there. It's available. It's guaranteed. It's better than money in the bank when God promises something, but He cannot give it to you until you do your part of the bargain. And then in Philippians 4:6-7, it says, don't be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. Love this verse. I've memorized it. I quote it all the time. And we like that part where we can just lay everything on His feet, and that is true, and that is a promise. And when we do finally give Him ownership over that situation, we can then get into the place where we can have peace. But then it also says later on in verse 9, I don't know if I gave you that one. I did. Whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put it into practice, and the God of peace will be with you. See, peace is a result of right living. Peace is a result of a renewed focus. Peace comes when you let it go and you start to follow Him. Peace can't come even though you can say, God, I give you all my stuff, all my habits and hang-ups, I'm laying them at your feet. You can say that all day long, and it's healthy. You should do that. But if you are not living then from that point in obedience to Him, by doing what He says and learning from Him and putting into practice, I'm sorry, but peace can't get into your life. You are the one, you're your worst enemy. You're the one that limits God's ability to do those things in your life. So mercy and the ability to see God has a part that you and I have to play. And today, it's not complicated. It's not complicated. It's actually very basic in its teaching and very difficult in its application. You all came in here carrying stuff. And a lot of those have to do with people or circumstance. God is inviting you today to receive His mercy. He's inviting you today into a relationship with Him where you literally can see him through your life, even in the midst, even though it might not mean him taking away that problem or overnight healing that relationship, you can see him and experience him even in the darkest of your days. You ever known somebody that lost a loved one and were able to just walk really humbly and godly through the situation? Somehow they had peace that came from who knows where. Well, it's because it's a choice. It's a choice they made, and it's a choice that you can make. I'm going to talk really briefly in the lives of a couple of pretty common, like from here, that are preached on a lot, people that we might recognize, and maybe you don't. Maybe you're still new in this. One of them is King David, big figure in the Old Testament, and the other one is Peter, one of Jesus' disciples. And I want to bring them in because I think it's great when we can look at the Word and look through the examples of others that walked before us, because I can't lay my life out and say, look at how merciful I am, learn from me, or look at how pure I am, just take a look at my life and I'll tell you everything you need to know. I think we're clear, right? We're all in this together. So let's look at a couple of guys in the Bible. That way we don't get too stuck on ourselves. The example of David, and I had to write this down because I wanted to just really quickly go through this. David, King David, was the man after God's own heart. He was the king God had chosen. What you might not know is that, 0 to 17, David was a shepherd, tended the sheep. When he was commissioned by God, his dad forgot about him, forgot that he had another son. They had to go and find him so that he could be brought to the prophets so that he could be anointed as king. That's one thing. But he was a good shepherd. 17 to 30, he meets Goliath, slays the giant. Still, that anointing of king, it still doesn't happen. From 17 to 30, he's still not the king. At age 30, he becomes a partial king because there's still division in his tribe, the tribe of Israel. And he has a lot of battles and he wins a lot of victories through that time. From 37 to 70, he becomes the full king. But in there, at age 50, he absolutely crashes and burns. He's 50. He stops going out to battle. He stays home. He notices they say, 15-year-old girl named Bathsheba. Brings her in, sleeps with her, gets her pregnant, and then ends up killing her husband to hide the sin. That's the guy who's after God's own heart. I don't know how bad your life is, but it can't be any worse than this. And yet, he writes most of the Psalms, and he manages to connect with God in such a way that he is known as the man after God's own heart. There's a couple of situations in his life, too, in addition to what I just said. In 1 Samuel 22, I don't think we wrote that up there because it's just too long. I just want to refer to it. It's a season in David's life when he ends up running away from Saul. The current king, his name is Saul. He's chasing after David because he's jealous. David is the anointed king. He's going to be his successor, so he doesn't like that. Pride gets in. He's trying to kill him. Chases David all the way into a cave. This is where this passage is. And David is in that cave, and at that particular moment, he's in that cave all by himself. And who comes into that cave with him but a few of his family members and about 200-300 misfits, other people that were also running from Saul. Kind of the rejects. They weren't the in crowd. That's who ends up in that cave. You know who those people end up being? They end up being David's generals. They end up being the 30 of his champions, mightiest men they're called. And out of that group, 3 that end up doing exploits militarily that are just unbelievable. So the point is, you might find yourself in a cave, chased, all alone, defeated, burdened. You hit the bottom of the pit. It's the worst moment of your life. That may be where you are today. Never discount, when we talk about God's mercy, what He can do when you've hit bottom. How much He can do if you'll just turn and look to Him, and that's what David does. And out of that comes this amazing group of people. So that's when he hits bottom. Then there's another situation in his life in 1 Samuel 27 where he's at the pinnacle. He's at the top of his game. And he is successful. His exploits in battle are legendary. The guy is living the dream. I mean, everything is good. They've conquered all these nations that have been trying to damage or defeat Israel. There's some semblance of peace, even though through David's lifetime mainly there's always some war that they're fighting. But in that time of prosperity, what does David do? He drops his guard. He's at the pinnacle. It's like you might be here today and you are living the life super spiritual. You're feeling connected to God, and that is just as dangerous and just as real is the situation when we're in the bottom, because what happens there is in 2 Samuel 3, I think we did put that one up there, 2 Samuel 3, verses 2 to 5. It says this, and let me just read it, and then I'll just refer to it really quick because we got to move on. It says, his firstborn, talking about sons born to David in Hebron, his firstborn was Amnon, the son of Hinnoam of Jezreel. His second, Chileab, son of Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel. The third, Absalom, the son of Maacah, daughter of Talmai, king of Geshur. Next slide. The fourth, Adonijah, son of Haggith. The fifth, Shephatiah, the son of Abital. And the sixth, Ithream, the son of David's wife, Eglah. These were born to David in Hebron. What's wrong with this picture? 6 kids, 6 wives. This dude was a player. Big time. And that was his downfall. That was what got him. And folks, when we talk about mercy and the need to receive mercy and to be able to be the forgiving person, because we need to be receiving that forgiveness, at the same time, we've got to talk about purity of motive, purity of heart. Really, what purity means is your life is lined up with the Lord. But like David, there are ghosts in your closet. There is attic space that hasn't been cleaned in a long time in your life. And those are the pitfalls. Those are the things that are going to pull you away. Those are the things that are going to keep you from fully realizing the ability to receive that mercy that you need and to be able to receive the forgiveness and the grace that He is waiting to give you. And it's going to keep you from seeing God because you have those things still unkempt and undealt with. And in David's case, it was his moral choices. 6 wives, 6 kids. And out of those 6 kids, one kills another one. One betrays him and steals his kingdom for a few years. David, when he's 70 years old, he dies a broken man because of those choices. So here we go. Mercy embraces both forgiveness for the guilty and compassion for the suffering and needy. And you know, you and I are the greatest recipients of mercy. The fact that you're here just shows how good and how forgiving and how loving God is. The fact that I'm standing up here talking to you guys is even bigger. Because if there's somebody that doesn't deserve to be up here, it's me. Not because I'm some false, this humility thing. No, it's because those of you who know me know that to be true. The fact is, we're all recipients of His mercy. And one of the things that blows me away, and then we'll go into the life of Peter, in Matthew chapter 18, verses 21 to 35, I'm going to paraphrase really fast because we don't have enough time to get into it all. There it is there, and I'm just going to, as you see it, I'm not going to read it all, but here's the gist of it. In Matthew 18, it tells us a story, and the story is about us. The story is about you. The story is about me. And here, the gist of it is in verses 24 to 27, there's a servant who owns the king 10,000 talents. That's up there, right? He's not able to pay the master. And he begs, he falls and begs for forgiveness, and he asks the master to forgive him. And the servant's master takes pity on him, cancels his debt. You know, in today's money, 10,000 talents is $3.5 billion. Big debt. He forgave $3.5 billion of your debt. What happens? The next scene in this saga happens in verses 28 to 31. There we find this same servant who's just been forgiven $3.5 billion worth of money in debt, completely slate clean, not even like, okay, pay me when you can. No, this was completely forgiven. Goes and finds a servant, a fellow servant who owed him 100 denarii. I looked it up, $5,800. Still a lot of money, but in comparison, it's ridiculous. And he refuses to forgive the debt. Verses 32 to 34, at the end, the master comes back, finds out the terrible thing he's done, and throws him into prison to force him to pay every last cent. In other words, he takes back that forgiveness. You've been forgiven $3.5 billion worth of stuff. And I think what he's asking you today is to forgive the $5,800 that someone else owes you. Then it moves on to Peter's life just really quickly. Peter is in the last chapter of John, verse 21. There it is. Jesus is resurrected from the dead, and his disciples, when Jesus was being condemned and crucified, killed, his disciples run, with the exception of one. Peter goes even a step further, and he actually betrays Jesus. In chapter 21 of John, we find Peter again on the edge of the Sea of Galilee, and he tells his buddies, let's just go fishing. In other words, let's just go back doing what we were doing before. He forgot all that the Lord had done, the 3 years that he had spent with Jesus. He forgot all of that and went back to his old ways. And not only did he go back to his own ways, but he dragged everybody else that was there along with him, and they went fishing. And they caught nothing. And then Jesus shows up on the side of the lake, and he tells them to throw the net on the other side. They catch a couple hundred fish, something like that. He brings them in and restores Peter back into fellowship. And I think that's the other challenge for us today. That's the challenge for us every day, is the choices that we make when the Lord forgives that huge debt, not to go back to how things were before, not to go back to the old self, because that's what the enemy's trying to do in our lives. He's trying to pull us back into the old ways. He's trying to get us back into those habits and hang-ups that got us there in the first place. And Peter, he should have known better. He walked with Jesus for 3 years. But he's given up hope. He's put off Jesus, is dead and gone. He was a good prophet. That's it. And then Jesus shows back up to find him doing what he was doing. He brings him back on the shore and forgives him and puts him back on the right path. That might be where you're at today too. That's where I'm at a lot of times. My daughter is on her way to Hume Lake right now. Lindsay is her name, to work for the summer staff, giving her an opportunity for a new start. She has blown her mom and I away with a reality of this story, how the Lord puts you on a path and he allows you one after another chances because he just loves you. And she's heading up to Hume to get a chance to refocus and restart her life. And I'm so excited, and she's so excited, and it's a great place to be. And here we find Peter on the shore being given another opportunity. And I want to just say to you, God never runs out of opportunities and chances. He never says, okay, that's it. That was the last straw. I know we do as parents with our kids, but he doesn't. There's one more straw, always. And so mercy and grace are always available if you'll just give it to him. Four takeaways. I know this has been a little disjointed. I'm not a preacher. I just like to talk about him. There's four takeaways that I want to leave with you guys. One is His mercy covers you. No matter where you're at, no matter what you're dealing with, His mercy covers you. Stop trying to carry that yourself. He's ready to erase the sin. He's ready to cut the chains of bondage that have kept you beat down. He's ready to restore you. And one thing I know about God is that He's always waiting for you to come back. You know, the prodigal son goes and squanders his life until he remembers, I had it so much better at Dad's house. And he doesn't walk back, he runs back. And where's Dad? Waiting for his son to come back. That's your daddy too. You're just waiting. The woman that was bleeding for 12 years, she'd emptied her bank account. She'd looked at all the doctors. She'd gone everywhere. And she just said, if I can only touch him, I'll get better. Jesus is right here. He's right here. He's here with us. Totally accessible. All you need to do is touch him. Peter betrayed his best friend. And when he found out that Jesus was on shore, he didn't just row over there. He jumped out and swam over there because he couldn't wait to get back to Jesus. Why do these people do this? Because they know, and those of you that have experienced it in this room know, that when you come to Jesus, He forgives, He restores, He wipes you down, He sets you back on the right path. Common theme, messed up people always run to God. So if you're messed up like I am, join me. Let's run over to where Jesus is. Mercy begets mercy. Number 2, His mercy for us by forgiving our billions in debt, and His mercy for us by forgiving our unforgivable sins. The way that He forgives us gives us a model, an example that we need to follow too. So who do you know that you need to show mercy to, that you need to forgive? You all have somebody. The devil wants you to put it off, but why don't you just, when you walk out of here today, just make that phone call. Probably be one of the hardest phone calls you ever made, but you'll get your kid back, you'll restore that relationship, and that burden that you've been carrying will be lifted. It changes your life when you forgive others because it releases their control over you. Did you know that? When you don't forgive someone, it may feel right because they did you something bad, and it could be totally unjust. But when you forgive, they have no more control over you. And that's why you can now be in a place to receive His forgiveness. Purity, like we see in David's example and even in our own reality, purity is it isn't just what you do or how you think, it's who you are. When someone is pure, according to what this passage is calling us to do, it's a person that's aligning their lives with God. It's a person that decides, I'm done doing things my way. I want to line myself up with Him. I want to live according to His will. I want to do things His way. And I want to follow His example. And when you do that, the reason why you're able to see Him is because you are now looking to Him to lead you, to guide you, to give you instruction, to make sense out of the confusion, to shine a light on the darkness that you have in your life. And yes, it does have to do with impure thoughts. And yes, it does have to do with the stuff you're dragging around. And yes, it does have to do with the internet and all the other stuff. But when you align yourself to God and you allow Him to invade your life and chase away the demons that are in your closet, that's when that light and that's when His cleansing Spirit, that's where His mercy and His forgiveness starts to come, and it enables you to see Him. And why do you see Him? Because you're not clouded by all the stuff that you dragged in here this morning. Do yourself a favor. Whatever you brought in here this morning, don't take it home with you. Leave it here. And then lastly, we really need God's mercy and we need His help in order to live out this life that we're called to live out. I understand a lot of you guys are in a place in your life where you're still checking God out. But you're going to follow and you're going to obey something in your life. And out of 50 years of experience of walking with Him, I can tell you right now, and seeing tens of thousands of young people turn their lives over to Christ, there is no better show in town than God. And so what I want to do is I want to bow our heads and I want to pray and just ask God, if this is you and you're still checking him out, but you're going, yeah, you know what? I need his forgiveness. I need him in my life. I want to be able to see him. I just want you in the privacy of your own heart to pray and ask him to take your life, to take it in his hands and to surrender the control of your life to him and say, I'm done trying. I'm tired. I'm discouraged. I don't know what else to do, and give it to him and pray something like, Lord, I give you control of my life.